Hey there. So, that smartwatch or fitness band on your wrist, it's pretty amazing, right? It's tracking your steps, your heart rate, even how you sleep. But have you ever really thought about where all that information goes once it leaves your wrist? Well, today we're going to dive into the secret journey your health data takes and find out who's really calling the shots. I mean, think about it. It knows how well you slept, how stressed you were during that meeting at work, how fast your heart was beating on that first date. It's collecting the story of you, one moment at a time. Because it definitely doesn't just stay on your wrist. Nope, it travels through this huge, invisible network of servers, companies, and even countries. And that brings up a really crucial question. Who is actually in charge of all this deeply personal data? Let's trace the path. So first up, we're going to map out the typical flow of your information. We'll follow it from the tiny sensor on your skin to the apps on your phone and, well, way beyond. It might seem simple on the surface, but trust me, it's anything but. Okay, so here's how it usually works, in 4 basic steps. First, obviously, it starts right there on your wrist. The watch collects all that raw biometric data. Then, step 2, it zaps that info over to your phone. From there, step 3, your phone syncs it up to a big cloud service, like Apple Health or Google Fit. This becomes your master health record. And then the final step, number 4, that central hub can then share your data with all sorts of other apps, a fitness challenge app, a telehealth service, maybe even your company's wellness program. See, every single one of those steps is a handoff, a point where someone new gets a peek at your information. So, who are all these different players handling your data? Well, in the world of data privacy, there are 2 really important roles that decide who calls the shots, and understanding these is key to figuring out who's in control of your data. First off, you've got the data controller. You can just think of them as the boss. They're the ones who decide why your data is being collected in the first place and how it's going to be used. In this whole ecosystem, a company like Apple or Google with their big health platforms, they're often the main data controller. They're setting the rules of the road. And then you have the data processor. So if the controller's the boss, the processor is kind of like a specialist they hire to get a specific job done. They only handle the data based on what the controller tells them to do. Remember those third-party fitness apps we just talked about? A lot of the time, they're the data processors, just using data from that central hub to give you a service. And this comparison really shows you the power dynamic here. The controller is in the driver's seat, making all the big decisions. The processor is just carrying out those decisions. And, this distinction is super important because it usually determines who's legally on the hook, who's liable if your data gets misused. But wait, it gets even more complicated. Because this whole chain of command doesn't just cross company lines, it crosses international borders. And that's where your data enters this confusing, overlapping web of totally different laws. And this isn't just some crazy hypothetical. Think about a totally plausible scenario like this one. Your data could literally be stored on servers in multiple countries at the exact same time. So, which country's laws even apply? This is what the experts call a jurisdictional labyrinth. And here's why it's a labyrinth. You've got these huge laws like Europe's GDPR, which is super strict. But then you've got HIPAA in the US, which a lot of people think protects them, but it usually only applies to doctors and hospitals, not most fitness apps. And now you've got new laws popping up like India's DPDPA, adding another layer. What this patchwork means is your data can be legally protected in one place and totally exposed in another, all on the same day. Okay, so with all these different laws, you might think you're covered. But honestly, the biggest loophole isn't in some complicated law book. It's in the 2 simple words you click almost every day. I agree. So what's the real cost of that click? This quote really gets to the core of the problem. You might be totally fine sharing your step count for a fun wellness challenge at work, but did you know that the same data could potentially be used for marketing, for creating a detailed profile on you, or even to influence what you pay for insurance. That's the thing. We often consent to one thing, but our data gets used for all these secondary purposes we never even imagined. This just begs the question, if a simple yes isn't really enough, then what does real, actual, meaningful consent look like? Well, privacy experts say it's got to be built on 3 core pillars. All right, so first, it's got to be informed. This means you know exactly what data is being collected and exactly why they're collecting it. No surprises. Second, it needs to be granular. This one's huge. It means you get to pick and choose. Maybe you're cool with sharing your step count, but not your precise location. You should have that control. And third, and this one is so important, it must be freely given. Think about it. If your employer says you have to join a wellness program, is that consent really free? Or is there a bit of a power imbalance at play? Yeah, exactly. So with that framework in mind, let's take a look at how the biggest names in wearables, Apple, Google, and Samsung, stack up. How do they actually handle your data and consent in the real world? Let's start with Apple. They've very publicly made privacy first their whole brand. I mean, their marketing, their design philosophy, it's all built around this idea. But what does that actually mean when it comes to your sensitive health data? Here are their main safeguards. First, and this is a big one, your health data stays on your device by default. It's not automatically shipped off to Apple's servers. Second, if you do decide to back it up to iCloud, it's end-to-end encrypted. You can think of it like a sealed letter that only you have the key to open. Not even Apple can read what's inside. And third, for any outside apps, Apple's HealthKit system forces developers to be really clear about what they're going to do with your data before you give them access. Now let's switch gears to Google and its company Fitbit. Their whole approach is built around this interesting tension. On one hand, they give users tons of control to connect different apps. But on the other hand, there's the potential for all that data to get folded into Google's massive data ecosystem. So Google Fit is a really open platform, which is awesome for user choice. The big concern, though, is the chance for this super sensitive health data to be mixed in with everything else Google already knows about you. And this isn't just a random worry. When Google bought Fitbit, they had to literally promise regulators in the EU that they would not use Fitbit health data to target ads. That right there is a clear admission of how valuable and how risky that kind of integration could be. And finally, let's talk about Samsung. Their Samsung Health platform has some incredibly powerful tracking features, but because they're such a massive global company, it has direct consequences for where your data actually lives. Samsung is pretty upfront about the fact that your health data might be sent to servers in a bunch of different countries. And while they give you all the required legal notices, what it means for you, the user, is that to really understand where your data is going, you've got to dig through some seriously long and complicated privacy policies. Okay, so after hearing all of that, you might be feeling a little bit powerless. But you're not. More and more companies are giving us tools to manage our own privacy. You just have to know where to find them. Here are 3 key things you should be looking for. First, consent dashboards. These are basically pages where you can see every single app you've given permission to, and more importantly, you can take that permission away with a click. Second, look for privacy preference centers. These let you control how your data is used, not just who gets to see it. And finally, keep an eye out for layered privacy notices. These are great. They give you a simple, easy-to-read summary up front, and then you can click to dive deeper if you want. It's so much better than a 50-page legal document. So at the end of the day, the data from your watch tells the story of your life, your health, your habits, your routines. In this world of data controllers, processors, and confusing laws, the most important question you have to ask is this: who do you trust to read your story? Thanks for tuning in.